What's up? This is McGonagall's sprint video, take two, because I don't know how to work QuickTime. This is the fourth quarter of the Mixed Fidelity Remote Paper Prototype project. This is my first sprint video going solo, so should be interesting. Yeah, cool, let's get started. We don't actually have any new tech to unveil this quarter. Focused a lot on study design and a lot on research and a lot on outcomes. But I thought I'd old time's sake. Um, but yeah, so as I said, this quarter the focus was really on research and really on validation and study design. Um, Previously, we have done some studies. So we did, if you remember, a case study last quarter where we really explored the breadth of experiences that McGonagall could prototype, as well as some of the limitations of things that McGonagall could prototype. And then we also did a usability study where we evaluated how usable the system was both for wizards and for users. But even though those were interesting studies, successful studies, and we had some interesting findings, both for the project itself and also to address some of the qualms that we've gotten from reviewers from a couple conferences, we really don't have good validation techniques right now. In order to figure out what designers can actually learn about this prototyping system, like how this prototyping system is, I don't want to say objectively better, but better by certain metrics than previous techniques, and that's why it's something that needs to be brought to the world, and that's why it's important. So that was really the focus this quarter, is designing a study that was able to show the contributions of McGonagall, especially as compared to techniques that designers use. So yeah, instead of participants of our studies that we've had before that were just, I shouldn't say just, but DTR students or other CS students or other just Northwestern students, now we're really targeting participants who have design background and have used other prototyping techniques. And then we really asked research questions that centered around the contributions of McGonagall. I can actually switch to the study now. This is not my study. So one, as I mentioned for a little bit, is how our system actually allows designers to learn more about their apps in a prototyping session as compared to other methods, and then how our system is more lightweight and low cost than others. Uh, yeah, so that was really those research questions there. It just is here on the study design, but that was kind of the central focus of our entire quarter. So the quarter as a whole, biggest kind of deliverables and milestones we made on the project. We wrote and submitted a paper to a conference before the year started. We also wrote a rebuttal off of that paper to address some of the comments by the reviewers, and then the rest of the quarter was spent designing the study, carrying out a kind of initial or test trial with Jenny, Allison, and Eli, and then doing a single trial kind of mini study to finish out the quarter with a design student. And then next quarter, the focus is going to be to try to do a study with designers of real, I shouldn't say real, but professional designers who have a lot of experience with these techniques. So yeah, anyway, jumping into the study design, I'm just going to go through it really quick so you guys have some context before we jump into findings. But yeah, so off those research questions I just mentioned, again, number one is about designers learning about their designs using McGonagall, and then number two is about how low cost our system is, especially in terms of prototyping creation. So our first design argument, kind of the design argument that we've had since we wrote the initial, or since last spring quarter, offering all of these techniques, native elements, multi-fidelity mounts, and live data to designers, while still maintaining a paper interface for the wizard. Users are able to interact with core functionality, and that gives them a more realistic experience that potentially affords better context, or it gives them better context and a more realistic experience that can help them with offering feedback to the wizard, or giving them more meaningful feedback to the wizard. It's almost as rich as working with a built-out app, which is kind of all we can aim for. And then the second one, which is very interesting, is it also just allows wizards to test experiences that just couldn't be tested with other methods. We're going to talk about one of those when we get to the findings. But yeah, another example of that's in the hypotheses. Let's see, a good example. Whoops, my computer was a little bit faster. Oh yeah, like if you were sending prototyping like a Snapchat-esque app, where you send photos of yourself to your friends. With our technique, the designer may learn that some users are like more self-conscious, and there could be lag involved when they're taking photos, which is confusing for the user on the other side, which you wouldn't be able to find if you're using a technique like Marvel or something, where you're just putting in static data. You're not actually offering live user-generated data. Another research question, addressing our other research question about the low costness of the system. It's more efficient than previous systems because paper affords quick sketching and interface generations. You don't have to line up things or kind of do the high fidelity neatness and like the tediousness that's necessary to do so with as you would need to with high fidelity techniques. We have a wizard, so no logic needs to be encoded by the designer, so that's specifically aiming at like patch-based tools, where you have to write kind of all that patch-based logic and computation before the app is tested, and we don't need to do that. The wizard can do that computation on the fly. And then some hi-fi functionality makes the prototype creation even easier. So that's specifically targets paper prototyping, where, for example, with a keyboard, the designer would have to draw out the entire keyboard, which is pretty tedious as well. Here we get the native keyboard, so they essentially get that interface element for free, which helps with efficiency as well. So I touched on the hypotheses a little bit. The conditions of our test is the participants' preferred prototyping method versus our method. Phase 0 is a pre-study survey. Kind of the main goal there is we're getting the user story that the user wants to test. So in our kind of final mini study with a design student, the design that their user story was take a pack of blueberries, scan them into the app, and then eat them. Her app was a like minimizing food waste type of app that had some different features that allowed you to track when your food's going to expire, track what food you need, things like that. Phase 1 of the study, the designer comes in and the focus is on prototype construction. So we teach them how to test prototypes, test a Pokemon Go prototype with the system. So they have some familiarity with the feature set that the system offers, as well as what a full-fledged McGonagall prototype looks like. And then from there, they build McGonagall prototypes of their app, and we time how long it takes for them to build that app. This participant, it took 22 minutes and 50 seconds. And then ask a few questions, specifically aimed at comparing how long it would take with other methods, approximations obviously, and then what was fast or slow about our method. And then we asked some usability questions as well. The second phase of the study is the actual testing session, so we bring in an additional user who's going to serve as like the user tester for the prototype session. Yeah, and the designer will actually wizard the user story for the user. So I have a screen capture of that I can grab. Where is that? Maybe not. Yeah, so this is helpful for understanding what phase 2 actually looked like. So you can see this is the designer, the prototype that the designer created underneath McGonagall, and they're actually wizarding it. So you can see here she pulls in the camera, which launches the camera on on the user side, and then puts down this photo element to get the photo from the user. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And then we ask some questions to get some data about that first research question, specifically comparing the takeaways that they had from this prototyping session to the takeaways that they've gotten from previous prototyping sessions. Okay, let's jump to findings, and I'll probably cycle back to that video screen capture. Yeah, so kind of the two general findings we got from that test was that creating paper prototypes with McGonagall is quicker than hi-fi methods. We had her rate how long it would take her to make the same prototype essentially with the methods that she'd previously used: Adobe Experience, Marvel, and paper prototyping. And paper prototyping and McGonagall, or she said paper prototyping would be slightly quicker because she wouldn't have to cut and glue the codes. She said if we use stickers, it would be actually the same amount of time. And then she said with Adobe Experience, it would take about the same amount of time, just because she was really familiar with the software and she understood the tips and tricks, which was really interesting because she was really familiar with that, but her first time using the system was just as efficient. And she said with Marvel, it would definitely be quicker to make the same prototype with McGonagall. Then the other interesting finding we had was that we could actually identify issues that previous solutions couldn't identify. And the data that we have for that is she offered that as like one of her biggest takeaways from the prototyping session. After she had tested the prototype with a user, she asked the user a couple interview questions, and one of the confusions on part of the user was that when the user was taking a photo of the blueberries, so the user story was she had to take a photo of the barcode such that it would be scanned into the app. The user expected a green square or green rectangle to outline around the barcode, and was confused when that didn't happen. And so our participant said that she would never have been able to get feedback like that because other techniques don't use live data. So that was pretty cool to identify takeaway that other solutions just couldn't get to. Shouldn't even call them solutions, techniques. Other techniques couldn't even get to. So yeah, those were kind of the biggest findings. A couple of things: the study design will need to be modified a little bit. As I said, we timed how long it took for her to create the prototype. That's really hard to compare to other techniques because, or maybe other previous times that she'd prototyped with it, using those techniques, because just the depth of the prototype is going to be different. There are a lot of different confounding factors that could affect which technique would get the lowest time. The only thing I could think would be kind of an A/B study where they make the prototype using one technique, and then they make it with McGonagall, and we compare those times. So maybe a different metric for comparing low costness might be something good to think about. And then I wanted to ask some more interview questions. So we got some interesting findings about takeaways, but a little bit more about how the realisticness afforded by McGonagall is also superior to other techniques, since we have kind of like the best of both worlds and are able to offer realisticness. And then in terms of kind of future work, what we're planning to do next quarter, as I mentioned, is we want to do a study with more participants who have a lot of like a professional design background, who are able to evaluate our tool. That's it. Hope it was decently interesting. Super excited for next quarter.